everybody. Welcome to Truth Teller Tales. I'm Ellen, and I am dedicated to interviewing those truth seekers who became truth tellers. And they all have this unwavering faith in this most incredible time to be alive. Today, I am interviewing somebody that I admire so much. I've been following him for years. He's a master at deciphering and putting together comms, which is used by the folks in this military operation to communicate with civilians through the keyboard. And he does it so incredibly, and I just think the world of him and admire him so much. And thank you so much, Stormy Patriot Joe, for being with me. Yes.
Ellen, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on. I love what you're doing. I love the idea of putting together these time capsules. Hopefully, people refer back to them in the future.
Yes, I think they really will. I really got that strong message that that's what's going to happen.
Good.
So, for those of you that don't know you, I interviewed Paul, and so it's just such a blessing and a treat to be able to talk to you. Um, if just briefly go over kind of what you're, I hope I said it right in the intro, kind of what you're doing, but give us a brief understanding of what you're doing to be able to tell folks kind of what's happening right now.
Yeah, the Paul that you mentioned on social media, he goes by like Absolute 1776. Him and I have known each other for a number of years, and like a few years ago, we decided that we would eventually make kind of a America First Q orientated show, and we actually planned it for a couple of years, and then we got the opportunity to launch it, and we've been on we're out on our own under Absolute Storm on Rumble, and currently we're on Tuesday nights at 9 Eastern, Wednesday nights 10 Eastern, Thursday nights 9 Eastern, and Sunday has a little bit of a different feel to it, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. A big part of that show is faith-based show. So what are we doing? What's the show about? It's a mixture of a few different things. Like I got the God and country thing behind me here, and that's really a big driver for both Paul and myself. Is basically to be able to see everything that's going on. I'm really good at, like you said, recognizing patterns and such like that. And we definitely present all four of those shows. We present the comms, if you will, or decodes, how it breaks into the news and shows the relevance that goes back to the cue boards. But at the same time, the best messages that Paul and I ever get are people that just say things like, you helped us find Jesus, you helped us find a reason to go forward. We've had a lot of people come to us and say, I get probably 100 messages a day that say, you kept me sane through the darkness. Things were going really sideways, but what you guys are showing helps us understand it in a way where we know that God wins, and we know that this is all for a purpose. We don't even know the bigger purpose quite yet for us throughout this movement, but we feel like Patriots are in control and it's going to make sense. So yeah, Paul and
Yeah.
I got together. We've known each other 5 or 6 years, and we planned kind of the timing of the show to get launched on basically the delta of the Q operation starting. So we launched it in October of 2022, and we're about on the Absolute Storm channel. We're about to hit episode 100 on Tuesday.
Oh, wow, fantastic. And when I was looking today, it says that you have close to 2.5 million views of your actual videos. I mean, that's amazing. And I think also what gives people comfort, because it has for me, what you do is, people have theories and people have ideas, but you fellas will say, okay, this happened, this happened, this happened. You showed that this happened, which means this happened. So people can be like, oh, okay, I see it. I get it. I understand. It is comforting in that way. It's not just you speculating. And it's a wonderful reference. And it is going to be, people are going to reflect back at how you put those puzzle pieces together. years from now, honestly, Joe, people are going to be like, "Oh my, how the heck did they know to do this and figure all this out? I didn't even know what I was going to have for dinner." I mean, it
Yeah,
just is.
yeah. What you're putting together here is what Q referred to as like the history books and like archive everything. So this is awesome. I'm glad to be a part of it.
Oh, I am just thrilled. This is such an honor for me. So now I want to do the fun thing too, where I just want to go back and hear about your
Mm.
story as a kid, like where you were born,
Yeah,
how you grew up. Just start letting us know more about you as a kid.
sure. I was 6.8 out. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I, I grew up in Connecticut.
Oh,
My whole family was really blue collar. My father actually, he was a New York City firefighter, and then he moved
oh wow.
when I was born and
Oh,
moved to Connecticut, and he was a Hartford, Connecticut firefighter. And my mother worked in retail, and I was basically so back when my father was a firefighter, they didn't make really any kind of money to speak of. He actually had while he was putting his life on the line in both New York City and Hartford, Connecticut. These are high traffic areas where he was pretty much out every single night, doing different duties. So it wasn't like one of these suburban lives for him.
mhm.
He had to have 2 to 3 jobs on the side just to kind of pay our bills, but most importantly was to help make sure that I was the one that went to college. And so my father was in the military, my brother was in the military, my father's father was in the military, his brothers were in the military. I was basically like, okay, Joe, we're gonna get you to go to go to college. I was like, all right, I'll go to college. Um, and I went to some small state school. It wasn't like a lot of money, but my father not only had to work those other part-time jobs, painting and roofing and bartending was some of the kind of jobs that he was doing, but he also, just to send me to the state school that was just a few $1,000s a semester. He actually had to even take a second mortgage out against the house. So that's kind of like the
Wow.
the the blue collar mentality. So like in high school and things like that, and even my first year in college, didn't take it all that seriously. And I got put in a position where I had a basically I had to have a reflection with myself to say that my father did all this and you're not honoring him correctly. So I what I did was I shifted all my course load to the evening, because what was happening was, I was a young guy, I was going out and different things like that. I wasn't making it to a lot of my classes during the day.
Yeah.
So once I shifted my course load to the evening, I was able to attend class and hear and listen, and I did well enough, put it that way, to get my graduation. I went to school for business management, and I was able to give my father and my mother my diploma and say,
Oh,
thanks for all the effort. Thanks for, my mom had to work too in retail, like I said, and really really put me on a situation where I could be the one that went and graduated college, and that was important in our family at the time. And I went to school
yeah.
for business management. Is what I went to school for.
Wow, that is so wonderful. So, so I have questions. But so when you were little, where were you in line with the siblings, and were you the
Uh,
one that was quiet? Were you the outgoing? Where were you with that?
oh man, you'd probably get different answers depending on who you spoke to. So the easier part of that is just my brother and I'm 6 years younger. So I'm the baby, if you will. All right.
Yes.
It's just us two. Um, and as far as like my personality traits and things like that, I would say some people would say like I'm a little reserved at first, and then once you get to know me, then like all bets are off. Like I
Hmm.
was like kind of I got nominated for like class clown and different things like
Oh my
that. And
God.
you know, but the trait ever since I was young was that everybody always commented that I could remember things really well, but it's specific things. They have to be like emotionally important to me for some reason. Then I can remember them very, very well, like pretty much nobody else. But other things like just learning things in school or even like traffic information, those go in one ear out the other. But
Yeah.
from a childhood standpoint, I grew up in this area of Connecticut that there was like a core of us. We all lived on the same street, and we all went through school together, all the way through high school, and
Wow.
then we've kind of parted different ways. And I moved down to Florida in 2000. So I've been down here
Okay.
for 25 years now. I sit in Tampa, Florida. Um, but when I worked, not when I worked, when I was a kid, I would
Yeah.
bring up like stories of what we did as kids, and I would bring up movie quotes, and I would bring up different examples of things all the time. And people are like, "Wow, you really like remember stuff like that's crazy to remember." And then when I got into my corporate life, even right out of college, there was certain things that we had to do from a finance standpoint, and I could do number calculations and have people understand it in a certain way that I became like known as like the Rain Man of that organization. And then going into the queue operation, the ability to recall and connect the patterns and see the
Yeah.
things, and also there's some sort of things about the numbers background that has
Yeah.
helped me in this as well, where people say that I'm kind of like the Q whisperer, is like what I hear a lot,
Yeah.
sometimes even Q Rain Man at times. But it's kind of funny
Yeah.
that I heard it when I was 5, I heard it when I was 19, I heard it when I was 25,
Exactly.
I heard it my whole
Well,
life.
that's what I love so much is, none of this stuff is an accident, right? All of those patterns, you look back and it makes sense. So the six years younger brother, sometimes that age range, you're just the annoying younger brother,
Yeah.
sometimes. Were you that in that case, or did you guys have a good relationship?
No, the relationship was always good. He went off at 19. He joined, like I said, the military and things of that nature. So, and then he from there uh, came out of the service and lived in California. So
Oh,
so the
wow.
so he's here locally now in
Oh,
Florida.
great.
So
Oh,
we see
nice.
each other a lot, and the relationship's great. But like, so I was saying, like, when he left, I was 13. So
Yeah,
you know
that's big, yeah. And so going off to school, so even though you were the one that was supposed to get that college education, as that representative in the family, so when did you in college take that shift more seriously, like you said, that you changed your classes tonight, you understood what your dad was doing. What happened for you to understand that?
I got put on probation.
Oh,
I got put on probation. That said that if you don't improve your coursework, you're not going to be able to attend the school anymore. And
yeah,
that was it. That was like, all right, everything's got to change. This is crazy. I can do this.
yeah,
I gotta attend, put in some sort of minimal work, and get through this. So, but
yeah,
it had to do a lot though. That was kind of like when I got that information, it hit me in the face that, man, you know my mother and my father had to do a lot of sacrifice to make sure that I
mhm.
was going to attend. So I took it very seriously after that.
And then so you graduate, and then did you look around for jobs in Connecticut, or did you
Yeah.
look everywhere for a job?
So I grew up not only tied to numbers and business management, but I also was really into sports, both
Oh,
from a standpoint of watching, but also I played everything. I played tennis, I played golf, I played uh, football, baseball, basketball. I played everything.
wow.
I was
When
always out. My
When did
entire
that
life,
start?
soccer, everything,
Okay.
riding BMX bikes, everything. I did it all. So what I found like an easy, what I considered the best transition right when I got out of college was a friend of mine was working at a fitness gym up north. They were called Bally Total Fitness at the time.
Okay.
Then they became, LA Fitness. But so I went in there as like a fitness instructor slash salesperson, and my first year there, I sold more memberships like than the company ever anybody ever had in their company history. And
Oh
then
my
I was promoted to assistant manager, like the fastest in company history. And then I became the general manager, like as the fastest in company history, and went on a really successful run, running multi-million-dollar company. Each club has its own bottom line, and they're multi-million-dollar budgets, and you have to make a lot of decisions around
yeah.
staffing and different things like that, and promoting and things like that. So, out of an early age, I was, you know, uh, I was 21 coming out. So I went to school early for whatever reason. I told you, that core group of kids that we
Yeah.
all grew up with, a lot of them were like a year older than me, but my mother and father just like kind of pushed me into school. So I graduated. I was a freshman in college, still at 17, and
Oh
it took
my
me
goodness.
with when I had to do that night schedule. It cost me another year to kind of move things around and get my course load situated. So I graduated in 5 years, but came out and went into that career. And I was in the fitness arena for about 10 years, running clubs from Connecticut and Massachusetts and Rhode Island and different things like that.
Wow, that is wild. And so for you being the top person doing that stuff, obviously your athletic background had to have played a factor of making you quite competitive. Wouldn't
Yeah.
you agree to strive to be the best?
Right.
And so before I move further, that's amazing that you played all those sports. And I know you and Paul both still love football. I know that's a,
Yeah.
a passion too. But would you say did you have one particular sport that you enjoyed playing the most, that gave you the most satisfaction? Did you like the team sport more, the solitary golf? I mean, what was that all?
I would say football. It was something that Paul and I have said it on the show. He was more hockey, and I was more
Mhm.
football. Was whether you're doing hockey or football, it's that team environment that you have to
Yeah.
rely on everybody, give everybody your best. And in football, in the neighborhood I grew up in, it crossed all diversity and all social economics and everything. So you didn't care what that kid or his parents did in life. You guys are all
Mhm.
coming together for a purpose. And
Yeah.
leaders and things of that nature rise to that type of occasion. And I think a lot of my personal traits were formulated from the years of playing football.
Oh, that is fantastic. And you're right. Paul said the same thing about hockey, without a doubt. And so you take that mindset, and you're very successful in business up there and surrounding. And obviously, you not only had to be aware of the bottom line, but you had people to manage, which is a completely different, skill set.
Yeah. Yeah.
How were you at that? Were you the forceful boss? Were you the quiet boss? Because you're to me, when I watch you, you're quiet, but then you'll come in with these zingers, and just that are so funny. So how did you think the most effective way for you to be a boss at those times when you were successful?
I would say the fact that I came through the ranks and did it from each position and did it at a high level, that helped, because then you're seeing the success. That I didn't ask anybody to do anything that I hadn't done and wouldn't
Mhm,
do.
mhm.
I would say that I tried to find out what the person did best and worked around those types of situations. So I would say it was constructive criticism, supportive,
Mhm.
and bringing into that team element of the structure.
Yeah, and I would think that working your way from the start of what you did, obviously, you become a much better leader, understanding all of that, you know? Um, so after you did that for many, many years, did you shift into something else, or did you stay into that arena?
When I moved to Tampa, Florida, I decided to kind of shift into more of white collar finance. So I sold business to business software, human capital management, HR, payroll type of things for a few different organizations. But the for what I did for like the next, I would say 15 years was pretty much the same, whether it was for a small business, medium business, or a large business. It was always the same type of arena. Working with businesses that just want to make sure their business is functioning better, and able
Mhm.
to identify the right partners and things of that nature to work with.
And so was that fulfilling to you, at that time? And did that you'll have to tell me the timing. Was that the same timing when you maybe started asking questions about the bigger things happening in the world?
Yeah, yeah. Good questions. Good questions. All right. So the timing was from 2000 to 2000. I didn't leave it until 2022. So yeah, we got 22 years of that nature,
Oh,
actually.
oh,
So 22
wow.
years of it. Same type of success. Every company I work for, I earned like their President Circle award winning for crushing your budget and things like that. Just
That's
being
awesome.
able to, how I didn't look at it as, a job. I just kind of went into it every single day trying to find out how I can help organizations, and that really came across that I was sincere in just helping organizations. And maybe what I had to show them was the right fit, and maybe what I had to show them that it wasn't the right fit for them. But they really bought into the process that I was going to just lay it out there and explain it in a way that made sense to them. And pretty much
Mhm.
any organization sales structure that you go into like that, some about a third is going to buy from you, a third is going to push off and not make any decision, and a third you're just not really the right fit. So if
Mhm.
you can always have that kind of mindset that about a third of the people that you speak to are actually going to go through the process and pick you, then you can work the
Mhm.
numbers back to find out how many people you really need to go through that process with. So those kind of, um, it's funny, the word that came across in all the different organizations I worked with, regardless of my manager, regardless of the company size, regardless of who I work for, when I would always have my debriefs with my management, was relentless. I don't know. The word was always relentless. Was that they didn't have to worry about me. That they made sure they knew I was going to take care of my stuff and go through that process and have everything, all the ducks in a row, and make sure that everybody was getting treated with respect and honesty. And but I was pretty relentless on making sure that I achieved above the numbers all the time.
That's awesome. Relentless. I love that. And so you were almost kind of like the big mini Doge, too. I mean, did you find, were there any organizations that you went in that were corrupt, that you thought, oh boy, this is not going to be good? I mean, or was everybody pretty much legitimate that you dealt with?
Yeah, I wouldn't work with people that were flat out corrupt. And there was some vetting of the type of companies that each one
Okay.
of these things. I worked mid market, so companies typically, to be a mid market company, they're 50 employees to 500 employees, and they've been
Hmm.
around with some tenure, and they have books of X amount of money. But it, it wasn't like shell organizations or things like that that you would have to be really worried about. Now speaking to the people, and a lot of the people that that I had to deal with, a lot of the organizations were obviously left leaning, because to work the process that we would have to work, we have to start with human resources, and like
Right.
85% of the people that are in human resources are left leaning.
Yeah.
In the products that we would have to deal with, most of them generated out of Silicon Valley, and had that kind of click about them. And
Hmm.
technology and finance space, a lot of it is left leaning. So you just had to just know that that was the deal going in. But no,
Yeah.
if somebody was obviously in corrupted nature, we wouldn't work with them.
And then during that, so I want to go back too. So were you always the person that questioned things that people told you in the bigger picture, in your little bubble? And when did that all start with you, where you just didn't take things at face value?
Wow, that's a great question. Yeah, I would say I would say that there's always been a kind of like a cautiously suspicious demeanor about myself.
Mhm.
Um, you know, as far as like my politics and everything go, I was just like I call myself a Reagan conservative. I grew up in
Mhm.
that kind of blue collar mentality, and you know, just went to work, put my nose down, and tried to make the best of my business life that I could. And it was right before the Q operation. It was the Vegas shooting happened, and the
Mhm.
Vegas shooting to me didn't make any sense whatsoever. Yeah, 9/11 happened, and there were some things about it that didn't make sense, but I was just so buried in my work, because I had friends at the time that came to me during 9/11, and they tried to explain, like, well, it's not possible for those towers to fall, and I would just say, okay, okay, didn't we have, like, that tested, and scientists, and they're like, well, it's all, blah 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 blah. And okay,
Mhm.
okay. So,
Yeah.
but when the Vegas shooting happened, I was like, no, that doesn't make any sense, because I just saw the different angles. I saw how little information we were getting. Vegas, I'm sure you've been to Vegas. It's the most filmed place in the world. Okay, well, but
Yeah.
where's all the video? Not only is every inch of the place, inside and outside, got cameras, but there was a concert where everybody had one of these, and yet to this day, today, we still don't really have much footage at all. It was like,
Yeah.
none of this is making any sense. Okay.
Right.
And there was a lot. If you dig into Vegas, there was a lot. So at that point, I was still working corporate America life, and I just kind of didn't sleep for like a week, and just started diving into alternative media. And I was just trying to find anybody talking about something different than you were seeing on mainstream news, because everything I was seeing on mainstream news was absolutely fake, and I didn't believe it. And that led me to Reddit and the Chans and YouTube, and anywhere that I could find that was just telling a different story. And that was on October 1st of 2017. And then the Q operation happened on October 28th, 2017. And it started on 4chan, where I already kind of was with what was coming on with the the Vegas situation.
Yeah.
And then Q, very early in the Qs, start talking about the Vegas shooting and things that are going on in Saudi Arabia, and things that already I was looking at. So I was like, whoa, this is something that I need to be paying attention to. And then I didn't have, when the Q operation started, I didn't have a Twitter account. So just shortly into the Q operation, so Q started on October 28th, 2017. I saw
Mhm.
enough in 3 days that I built my Twitter account on November 1st of 2017, or something like that. And I only built the Twitter account to lurk in the background, and just because you needed it, because everything in the keyboard was relating to what Donald Trump was tweeting about a lot of it. So you needed basically a Twitter account to be able to see the back and forth with Donald Trump and Scavino and the Q board. And then other people were starting to put pieces together. So I built my Twitter account in November of 2017. It got suspended January of whatever with everybody else when POTUS got kicked off. I never got my original Twitter account back. That original Twitter account is Stormy Patriot 21, and I got queued twice, so I'm in the queue drops twice. So I hope someday that account gets reactivated, just for reasons like we're doing here. It would be great for the historical context to be able to still be able to point to that live account, and hopefully that will happen because they're starting to supposedly turn back things down with YouTube and different things. I did create a YouTube account eventually, and I put up about 20 videos, and then they were all systematically taken down. Interesting enough, though, the only one that stood the whole time was the one I did about Jim Comey. So that one, so it was pretty interesting because the day that Comey ends up with the indictment is the day that Jim Jordan comes out and says, hey, we're pushing back on YouTube, and your guys are going to get your channels back, and we're not going to allow for things to be stifled for political reasons on YouTube anymore. And it was kind of weird that all the I did like 20 videos, 19 of them were taken down, but the Comey one I did stood the test of time, and it's there. And the account's active on YouTube, but Absolute and I are on Rumble.
Yeah, so I have so many questions. So back when you were involved and were as an anon for Q, and you said you were queued, and I've always figured this was the case, but I'd love to hear it from you. So basically, there are in those military drops. I just want to make sure I'm getting it correct. There's drops in there, questions from anons, right? And then they, the Q replies, and so that means that your post in the military drops, you were part of that. And so you said that happened to you twice. Am I understanding it correctly?
Some of them, yes, and some of them are different. All right, so I'll explain what happened, and I'll go through my two if you like.
Yeah.
So during the period that Q was posting on the chans, there was a period of question and answer and things like that. So anons would post to the chan boards questions, and Q would reply, and those replies would end up to be in the Q drop, so that they would be replying back to anon. So you wouldn't even know, because 4chan and 8chan and 8kun, they don't have handles and things like that. It's just all anonymous, whoever's putting that stuff up there. Okay. But if you had a Twitter account or some other account like that Q would use, they would grab your Twitter handle and put it in the drops as far as this person said XYZ, and Q would reply. And both of mine were from my Twitter account. I didn't build like a handle on the chans and stuff, because you could just go on there and lurk. So I wasn't posting on the chans. It was a lot of crazy stuff, and I still had my full-time job. So I was just using the chans to see the drops, and then they ended up creating aggregators that would pull all the Q drops into a different standalone app, so you wouldn't have to surf through all the crazies on the chans. And I ended up spending most of my time on those aggregator sites. So I didn't post back and forth with like the anon board. And so really quickly, how funny it all turned around. Of course, probably nothing is a coincidence. When I told you about how I built my Twitter account early in November of 2017, Q had referenced that 11.11 will bring unity, and I ended up putting that in my bio on my original Twitter account. Now, when I built it, I didn't really have intention of doing a lot of posting, or certainly not doing videos, and certainly not podcasting and things like that. I built the account just to be able, like I said, to follow the back and forth. Well, I end up posting. I end up, getting invited to do shows. I ended up doing really short kind of like videos of my phone a lot during especially different times with COVID and different things that would pop up. So I posted a lot of short videos, and I, like I said, made the YouTube channel and things like that. But the first time I was queued, Q had, let me see. The first one was the back and forth. Okay. So the first one, Q had a period where Q left, like didn't post for like 6 weeks. And Q would take little breaks of posting from time to time, and we would look for, some sort of signal from Dan or Trump that was still the same Q. Even though everything is trip coded and tight, you still wanted to have that extra confirmation that something was confirmed by either Dan or Trump. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Q took like a 6 week break, and I was at lunch for my corporate business world, and I saw that Q had posted, and I looked quick at Scavino and Trump, and I saw that Trump had posted, Q had made a Q drop, Trump posted like a minute later, Q had made a Q drop, and I just screen recorded that back and forth with Trump and Q, walking back to my office, and just posted it like I do all the time, like whatever, screen record, posts, off I go to my life. And then all of a sudden my phone started blowing up and everything, and it was like, oh my God, you were cute and things like that. But to wrap it all the way around, that was on November 11th. So
Oh,
so I don't know, November 11th, 2019 was the first one. And then 4 days
wow.
later, kind of a funny story too, because I was just threading on Twitter. So, if you're familiar with Twitter, if you make a post, that goes out to what I call like the wall, where everybody sees that like original post. But to
Yeah,
see when you're making a thread and you're posting underneath that one top thread part, you really
right.
have to go into like that person's replies. You don't get like that in your feed as much. You only kind of see that top one. Well, I was just making a thread about things that were going on with the whistleblowers and Snowden, and like Stormy Daniels was in the news that day. So I was actually making like it was a serious thing about like whistleblowers, but I also was making like a Stormy Daniels joke, like three parts of the way down my thread. But as soon as I hit send, it's like my phone started beeping on the side, and that like immediately was queued. So I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy, because like I said, it was deep down, like the queue hit like the third thing in that thread that I made, and it was like, wow, that's pretty crazy, and it was pretty instant. So they see all, that's what I'll say. But it was but that particular queue talks about whistleblowers, and it might even come up with this possible shutdown, because it's about Q says it's all about the break. And one of the things that we talk about, the break, is possible. One of the possible meanings for that is a government shutdown, and will we have
Hmm.
one coming up? I don't know, but
Right.
that one, that thread I was doing eventually was getting towards, and that's a Q replied back to me, was Q replied back about the whistleblowers, and it's all about the break.
Wow. But that's wild to me, Joe, that it was that quick. I
Yeah.
mean, what the heck?
Yeah,
You
it's
know?
literally. Like I said, I had some serious things in the post, but then I was like making fun. Like I took a Star Wars gif, and yeah, pretty funny, pretty funny.
I mean, I hope we learn what really, I hope we learn a lot, in the
It's
coming
a
years
trap.
about all
Yeah.
of this, you know?
Now, I remember. That famous part of Star Wars. It's a trap. It's a trap. Like when I was doing the thread, um, it was like I was trying to say we're trapping them with the whistleblowers, and then I put that Star Wars gif in it. So it's in there. It's in that whole thread that Q hit. It's funny.
I mean, that is wild. Yeah, and maybe that's why some of these, your Twitter accounts. I lost mine account. Mine wasn't anything like you were doing, but I went to January 6th and reported on it. I guess that's why. But yours is historical, obviously, because you're in there. And so it's just so fascinating to me. So at that time, were you like some of the other folks that I followed that had the timeline wrong, that was confused when things were posted as to when things were going to happen? Where were your thoughts on that at the time?
Okay, I'll go through it. So early on, we thought that like when Q would write something, it was for the current status, and some of it was like I went through with the early Q drops. Things were going on in Saudi Arabia, and Q was posting about it, and Q was talking about Vegas. So it was like current events. But
Mhm.
then every once in a while, Q would just drop like a totally different topic in there. And at one point, somebody asked Q, like, is this coming up? Like, what is this post about? And Q said, future meaning, future meaning. Then in my head, because Q had written future proves past and things like that,
Mhm.
I started to see that not everything is for what I call real time, that things are late in these drops for future. And I've always said when Assange hits the news, as far as like that everybody gets to see Julian Assange and what he has, then that's really when everything is blown wide open. And that still to this day hasn't happened yet. But it took me a while. I never was one of these people that were saying like, okay, on this day everything's gonna blow wide open and we're gonna have chaos and it's all gonna like there's these major roundups. I never was like that. But I'll also say that really early on, I understood that Patriots are in full control at a level that's unimaginable. So it just I just had like a different view than a lot of people that were following Q at the time took. Like I would even troll about it. I literally had Robert Mueller as like my pin underneath my Twitter account as my pin tweet, just because like everybody left, right, and center thought Mueller was on a witch hunt to get Trump, and I was like,
Mhm.
no, he's not. So it took me to figure out that not only were they written for future events, that a lot of these things are cyclical and they'll come back in what we call deltas. So we started to see things from like a year in advance, 2 years in advance, 3 years in advance. And now, to be totally transparent, did I think that, we'd be sitting around still talking about all this in 2025? Probably not. But I say that, but then I also said, that they laid out like a 16-year plan to us that it was supposed to be Obama for 8 years, and it was supposed to be Hillary for 8 years. And I also said maybe this is going to be a 16-year operation here. So, and we're about 8 years in. So maybe I was right all along. Who knows? Who knows?
Wow. And it is so interesting, Joe. I know you're bombarded with theories all of the time, but you can come up with some good um, thoughts about it because you've been immersed in it from the beginning. But you hear things. Do you feel like this plan, which who knows how long that they've been planning this? Do you think they followed it? You think there was a chance something was actually supposed to happen in 2018 and didn't? Do you think that this has always really been the structure of what they knew they had to do in order to save humanity?
I think the plan has been laid out, and we're on it. Too many things that are in the current news cycle are still hitting the deltas. So to me, that wouldn't
Mhm.
have occurred if there was like this big shift and big change and this, that, and the other thing. So I believe I believe God's hands are all over this movement, and I believe it's been a military operation with years and years of planning. So I think we're exactly where we were supposed to be, and that the timing is always been this way.
Yeah, divine timing. It's so cool. And so I want to then dive into um I've talked to several folks who also were intrigued with the cue boards and things, and they all said that because of the biblical references in the cue drops, that it actually increased their spirituality and their connection with God, and that cue board is the one that opened up their eyes spiritually, which is fascinating to me. When would you say w that has happened for you? Was it a slow process for you? Were you or how was that journey?
Well, I went to, you know, Catholic junior high, Catholic high school. So I've always been in my faith. I would say that the birth of my two sons brought me closer. And then the I agree with the other nuns that say the Q operation helped them go into it at a deeper level. There's so many things in there, so many references and Bible verses and things that have happened, that you have to just be able to see that God's hands are all over this operation.
Mhm.
And it was at the moment where I was still working my corporate America gig, somehow doing 60, 70 hours a week there, and somehow doing about 100 hours a week doing this, that I decided that, you know, we were gonna go from, at the time, Paul and I we were doing Tuesday and Fridays at the time, and that we were gonna do a Sunday show. And to be able to do 3 shows a week, I was going to have to leave the corporate America world to be able to have the
Wow.
bandwidth to be able to do 3 shows a week. And I was at an event, and I had talked about it on the air, saying, like, we're considering doing a third show per week, and we're considering doing it maybe on Sundays and things like that. But at that event, I had several people come up to me and say, you have to do the third show, and 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 what you need to do is start tapping into the spiritual world, and start with that. So I came back, and Paul jumped in 2 feet, and he's really, really entrenched in it. And we
Mhm.
were going to just do like 10-minute segments and call it, like Armor of God and things of that nature, and just have it be like a 10-minute segment of a longer show. Now it's now we're on Sundays from 7:30. We go about 2.5, 3 hours now, because
Yeah,
we're not structured in any situation. Paul and I are on our own channel, and we can go
right.
on and be on as long as we'd like.
It's awesome.
That has turned into about over half of that show. So about an
Yeah.
hour and a half to two hours on Sundays. It's all faith based. And one of the persons that came up to me and said that you have to do it, and he does the scripture readings for us and the lessons. Dave Costanzo
Yes.
on part of it. So that
Oh.
little handoff, that little hint and nod, like you've called it, kind of like the God tap.
Mhm.
Well, several people at that event said the same thing to me, and then I went back to Paul, and he was all in on it. And then we started doing the Armor of God segments on Sunday, and I stayed in contact with Dave to be able to ask him certain things. And then, I can't remember if I asked him or if he asked us, but we were like, why don't you do like a record and give a lesson each week? And that's been awesome. He does a great job with that.
He does. I enjoy that very much, and I enjoy all of your shows, but each one is slightly different and really enjoyable. And the other thing I've just found so interesting is that, I've interviewed a couple fellas who are doing what you're doing, but in different avenues, and several of them have partners that they really are connect with and do shows with. And so it's just so interesting because you and Paul just really work so well together. I mean, how do you think that all came about? And do you just see that partnership staying for quite some time? Because it's a really good relationship, just as a viewer.
So Paul and I connected, like I said, about 5 or 6 years ago, and we formed a relationship, and we saw the board in a similar way, and we talked about eventually getting together and putting out like a I won't even really call it a Q show because we talk about so many different things, but that would be the basis of it.
Mhm.
And we talked about it for like 2 years because we wanted to make sure we did it right, but we also wanted the timing to be right because we wanted the progression of the show to always be wrapping around these deltas that keep coming around with the Q board, and they have. And so the way we space out the shows and the way we do what we call our history of Q, where we show certain we take the walk in the same type of time frame with the Q operation with the posts. Now as far as him and I's relationship, we have a lot of things in common, and but we build off of each other's strengths. So he's a
Yeah,
professional video editor. He did the
right,
reads for us for the commercials in when we were under the umbrella. There's a lot of similarities, but also there there's some things that he does that
yep,
just I don't have the bandwidth or the knowledge or the
right,
background to
yeah,
do. And some of the things that I'm I'm really strong at, and that I've been told that are attractive to what I bring to the table. They build off of each other, and
absolutely.
I think together we put out something special.
Yeah, it's a great team, and yes, you both, and that's another, I think, a divine thing because you can tell both of you have your specialties, and bringing them together creates this wonderful package, and you can see a genuineness within both of you, and it's just so awesome.
Yeah,
And
and
you
just to
know,
spin off of that too is I would be remiss not to mention the team and how the team kind of came together. So
yeah,
when we all got booted off of Twitter, really how Paul and I got together was on Telegram and in like a kind of a chat group of anons is how Paul and I kind of got the relationship, but also forming my own Telegram channel and putting out messages on Telegram. In my comments there, I saw Kim Sachs. Okay. So I knew Kim Sachs from she had been queued a few times, and I used to talk to her every once in a while on Twitter, but I saw her in her comments there, and we started talking again. So we started, putting together decodes, and then once the show launched, obviously she's helping put together the show. And in my comments, I also found Shannon Armenis, and she was just replying to me a lot with really smart takes. And I was like, well, if you want to help us, be part of these takes, come on in. She's newly woke, and she woke like basically in the COVID period, but
mhm,
she's really, really smart. And so Paul and I started doing the shows, and one show we decided to do was part of one of the segments on one of the shows was to highlight like a memer, if you will. And Rev ended up being the first person that we highlighted for a memer. I later found out that it was his birthday. I had no idea. And then we decided to do another segment for kind of like highlighting a decoder,
mm,
and I didn't even remember that Rev was the first memer. I just saw him as doing this decode, and I used him as the first like decoder. And then he messaged me and said, "Did you know I was your first memer? And did you know? And did you know I was your first decoder?" And then he told me that I hit him on his birthday, and I was like, "Whoa,
oh,
dude! Why don't you help us out on the show?" So
yeah,
Rev became part of the fold, and then obviously, uh, Abs' wife Barb has been
yeah,
there the whole way through, and she does a whole lot
yeah,
behind the scenes, helping put everything together and helps with everything as far as the production value and
yeah,
putting together segments for Armor of God and Patriotic Performances. She helps the whole way
Mhm.
through and through chat. And we also have Penny Lane that helps us with the chat and things like that. She owns Chatland. She's awesome.
Yeah, and I've seen all of them, and they are dedicated, but they're dedicated because you all are genuine and doing something really important. And so I just have to end with this, Joe, because I'm incredibly optimistic, you know? I'm so pumped that we're living right now and that we kinda have a front row seat, and because of people like you, I I know what's coming, and it's gonna get tough, but it's gonna be amazing, and I just wanna thank you for so many people that watch you for being that source so we can walk around with this sly little grin that we know these things, and we can feel comfortable and we understand that full control type of thing because of because of you and Paul, and folks like you. And so I just hope you feel the optimism that you're spreading, with so many people because it's a thing. And I just want to thank you from all of us who listen to you all the time.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I could tell by the books you have in the background there that you have that 40,000 foot view, and you can see the bigger picture because a lot of those books behind you help Paul and I, and we highlight a lot of the things that are behind you there for a reason. Now, I would say that I how now this is just me, how I kind of see things. I talk about it, and I've been talking about it for about 2 years now. That we're at some point we're going to have at least one big major scare event. Okay, we
Yeah.
and to my reading of all this, we haven't had like the big one. A lot of people would say, "Oh, that's a 2020 election. Oh, that was COVID. Oh, is this, that, and the other thing." To me, we haven't had it yet
Right.
because in the cues where Q is talking about it, and it's Q521. He's talking about like the Q team is talking about like a major scare event that has to like push back to our beliefs in trust in the military and all these different things. So I'm seeing that we're going to have something occur now, whether that's something with one of Air Force One or Air Force Two or another Butler style event. I'm not sure. Will it be Trump? Will it be JD Vance? Will it be some of Trump's family? Could it be a mix? I'm not sure. Could it lead to one of those players that has to come off the board for a short term or maybe even a long term period of time? Those things are all possible. And what I'm seeing is that Q gave us Israel for last for a reason. Now, if you watch Paul and I, we're not where a lot of the community has this like just like, oh, we need to turn Israel into a concrete and just level it, and everybody there
Mhm.
is bad. That's not where
Mhm.
Paul and I come from. The where
Mhm.
we come from is that's the chosen land, and that the people are not the same as as what has been kind of rooted in all of these. Now, we're not blind. We see that the Mossad and these different things are rooted worldwide in
Yeah,
politics and big companies, and are behind a lot of the bad that's happened in the
right.
last while. So there's probably going to be this major scare event that eventually leads us to uncover that and
Mhm.
show, like, at the same time, all these bad things that will have to get unplugged, but meanwhile at the same time doing the things that, and it's funny because as soon as we're talking about this, Trump and Bibi are basically talking about the same exact things. They're
Yeah,
talking about peace in the Middle East and that it's going to happen. But for me, there has to be kind of like this in between event that splits that so people can see all the bad things that have happened so they don't
mhm,
happen in the future, and how some of those things now I believe a lot of those things have already been unplugged, but this
right.
operation tends to want to show people versus tell people. So
Yes.
I do see some sort of major scare event. that gets tied back to Israel, and maybe that somehow is the optics and manpower that people will get behind it and understand it, and maybe optically do a few of the things that have to get done. Everything else
Mhm.
hasn't worked, right? As far as getting peace in the Middle East, it's been going on for
Right.
whether you're talking about just regular times or biblical times. It's always been a problem over there. And at the same time, also, Hugh let us know very early on that actually Donald Trump in Russia and China and others are all working behind the scenes together to take out what I'm describing, basically the New World Order. Now, in those early Q drops, it talks about the hunt for Red October and the sum of all fears. That's also suddenly ramping up with what Trump is describing with Russia and Ukraine and different things like that. So the Red October cues, the sum of all fear cues, could over and cross connect with Israel for last, that like whatever giant scare event may or may not happen might take us
Mhm.
to a place where we're kind of like at a worldwide standoff with different things. But regardless of what we see and regardless of how it looks, I think take a deep breath, give it 72 hours, and it will start to make more sense as to why. And at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Q that we're going to like the end of this movie, and that Patriots are in full control and God wins, or a lot of people already say God already won. And we're just kind of showing people the path here. And that's really where I'm at. I do see probably one or two major quote unquote scare events that get us to that precipice. So that's how Q put it. At the precipice is the will that to cause the real change. And in my
Yes.
opinion, we haven't reached that ultimate precipice yet.
No, no. But gosh, Joe, this is so exciting. Can you imagine we're living in a time of a
Right.
world that is going to change forever? And I mean, and it's the most historical, amazing, incredible time to be alive. And and that's why I wanted to talk to folks like you, because this is so historic, and you were able to have the eyes to see and the will to share it, and your how you were as a kid all the way through is what was able for you to be able to do this. And it's just a joy and a miracle to be here, and it's such a biblical, incredible, godly time. And thank you for being talking to me. I know I was bugging you to do this, and I just appreciate it so much. And this is going to mean the world to so many people. And we look forward to some bumpy roads, I think, but it's going to be an incredible ride. And I think just as long as we ride the wave and we can sit on top of it and not get
Yeah.
immersed in the bottom of it, we'll be able to ride it out, right?
Yeah.
And so thank you for being part of the reason why we can ride that wave. Really appreciate you and Absolute Storm and Paul for this journey. Thank you
Yeah.
for joining me today, Joe, and I can't wait. We'll watch you again tomorrow night, and all week long, every week. Really appreciate all you're doing for all of us. So thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and look forward to regrouping with you and see how the rest of this story unfolds.
Ah, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Joe, so much. And thanks all my audience for being here. And I will be back again with another interview. But Joe, thank you. Thank you for all you do from everybody. Okay.
Thank you.